that. It hasn't got worse, which is positive, but it's still possible that it could get worse. So I'd rather not speculate, but I think we would say it's reasonably stable at the moment compared to yesterday.
Matthew?
Hi, Matthew Chance from CNN. Looking at all this destruction in Fukushima and all the consequences of it, do you believe in retrospect that you were too soft on Japan, that this agency supported its nuclear expansion but failed to get the country to impose adequate safety measures?
It's a question of our role. Our role is to provide member states, and Japan being one of them, of course, with the guidance, the safety standards. We provide them advice. But unlike, for example, the area of nuclear safeguards, where we have powers which allow us to inspect and to check, this is a job for the nation state, in this case Japan. So we provide them with help, advice, standards, reference, but it's up to Japan, it's up to every other country to implement that advice as they best see fit. It is not mandatory.
So were you, just to follow up, were you aware of the risks Japan was taking by building reactors so close to the coast, for instance, in a very an area of great seismic activity? Or were you not aware of the risk?
Well, we were aware that the reactors were being built, and we understood that there were earthquake possibilities, but as the Director General mentioned yesterday, it wasn't the fact that there was an earthquake that didn't come as a surprise. It was the level of earthquake and the proximity to the coast that was a surprise. So I'm sure Japan had made their assessments on the best basis they could with the information they'd had, and we found that nature surprised us.
Just one final question, just this criticism that's been levelled at you by Yuli Andreev, the former Soviet nuclear expert who was involved in the cleanup operation in Chernobyl. He says that, what's happened since Chernobyl is that the nuclear industry has basically ignored the lessons from that disaster in the pursuit of profit, and that the IAEA has stood by and let that happen. How do you respond to that criticism?
I think it's unfair. Without seeming complacent, nuclear energy, I think, has got an enviable safety record. If you look at deaths, for example, from other ways of producing energy, and compare that with the nuclear, it has an enviable safety record. So the problem, of course, is that whilst the probability of getting an event like this is relatively low, the consequence in the reactor situation can be high. But again, as of today, I am not aware that anyone has died from this accident. That's not to seem complacent. We're far from that. But the facts stand for themselves, that the nuclear industry does have a very good safety record. As ever, you can never get the risks down to zero, and this is a good example of the care that needs to be taken in the future, and that member states, I'm sure, are taking. But I hope that's not an evasive question, evasive answer. Sorry.
Fredrik Tahl from Reuters News Agency. Just to follow up on this question, could you tell us the elevation of this power plant, how high up above the sea level that it was built, and also if there are any safety guidelines from the IAEA on what the elevation should be, i.e. was this plant below that level or above that level?
Right. Okay. I don't know the answer. One of my colleagues may know. Of course, this plant, I think, was built in the late 1970s. The safety guidance then has changed clearly in the last 30 or 40 years. So that's one dynamic, that it was built, designed probably in the late 60s, built in 70s. We're now 2011, so with time the knowledge has increased. But perhaps I could ask Denis or one of my other colleagues if they have any information about the...
Yes, first I must say that in the field of the safety standards in the area of earthquake, tsunami, while all what we call external aggressions to nuclear power plants. There are different documents that we issue. First, it must be understood that there is a hierarchy of the documents we issue, which we call in a generic name as safety standards. There are safety principles, which is the highest level of safety standards. Then there are safety requirements, and requirements, the name itself speaks for itself. It is a requirement, it is really something which is required, but keeping in mind that it is the responsibility of member states for, they are responsible for safety. So it is a requirement, but it is not legally binding. And then there is a level under that, which is safety guides. And guides, again, the name speaks for itself. It is a good way to reach the objective, the safety objective, which is required by the requirements. In the field of external hazards, as I call that, there is one document which is a specific safety requirement about the site evaluation for nuclear installation. This dates back from 2003. Then we have a collection of 8 specific safety guides in this field, and the dates range from 2002 to the latest is 2009. And then we have standards which are in development, and one will replace, in fact, 2 earlier standards. So this is to show you that standards is something, and safety is something which is evolving with time, evolving with lessons learned. There were many lessons learned after 3 Mile Island. There were many lessons learned after Chernobyl. There will be many lessons learned after this accident. And I must say also that there have been also lessons learned after the major earthquake which happened in 2008, I think, and which affected the Kashiwazaki Kariwa nuclear plant in Japan. So the question about the level of the...
So the containment pressure goes up, and that's what we see. And then in the 15th is when we saw the, when we heard the explosion in the suppression pool area for Unit 2. Pressure decreased after that. That was when we were concerned that the torus or the containment had been damaged. But what we saw is it stabilized and started to increase. So it gives us some indication that that pressure vessel is kind of hanging tight there, at least to some extent, that it's not completely open to atmosphere. Again, so it's a little over 1 atmospheric pressure above standard pressure. So for Unit 3, the levels have been fairly constant, but lower than in the other 2 vessels, down closer to 20 centimeters below the top of the fuel, and again, the pressure, the level monitors are within 5 centimeters. Is not that uncommon to see that sort of discrepancy between the 2, but by seeing them track along the same lines, that gives you some confidence that you're reading pretty much the right level there. Here you can see they were working on cooling and depressurizing the vessel. It's come down to about 1 standard. There's 1 bar above the atmospheric pressure, and is stabilized, or in some cases slightly increasing with one of the monitors. And for the containment dry well pressure, again, it has come down and is hovering right around 1.5 bars. So, again, it seems to be holding tight. So that's what I have for you today. We'll see what we can come tomorrow. Do you want to? We have another presentation, so I don't know if we want to get into questions now. I don't.
Jim, there's just one thing. I think you said minus 1,400 millimeters is 14 centimeters, 140 centimeters.
Excuse me, 140 centimeters. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm still transitioning from English units from the U.S., so you have to forgive me. So I'm working on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Renata?
English units from the US.
Yeah. If I could just introduce Renata Savinsky, who's an expert in radiation protection, and she's going to give us an update on some of the measurements on site and in 4 cities. Over to you.
Thank you, Graham, for the introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, very short. I have to. Yes. I would like to inform you briefly on some measurements on site as well as some measurements off site, which we received in the last 3 days. Here you can see an overview of measurements taken at measuring point 5 and measuring point 6. I produced here the results from measuring point 6, which had higher values than on measuring point 5. So, and it was, we were able now with the information,
use the microphone, just watch.
Yeah, okay. We could now combine the measurements also with the events. You see at the 15th March, we had the highest value with 12 millisievert per hour, and we had later, some hours later, 8 millisievert per hour. The first event could be combined with a fire in the spent fuel pond in Unit 4 and with the explosion in Unit 2 and with a fire and explosion in Unit 4. For the second peak, we couldn't find any technological reason. In the next day, the 16th of March, we measured 11 millisievert, we got the information that 11 millisievert per hour were measured, and it can be related to the emitting of white smoke at reactor 3. We have some, you see, the 17th is still empty. These values were still evaluated. And I would like to mention also the one peak of 400 millisievert per hour, which was measured once between Unit 3 and Unit 4 at the 15th of March. But we didn't get back any new measurements in that high. The next slide shows you the situation at the Daini, Fukushima Daini side. The dose raise measurements here are also in